What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and the most important picks you'll make in fantasy drafts this year are in the early rounds. So this is obvious, but if you go into the first 3 rounds without a plan, or you make bad picks, you screw it all up, or you try to get too cute, you're going to have a bad time. And I want you guys to win your fantasy league. So today, we're going to talk through my early round draft strategy for 2024. Pretty much going through the top 3 rounds in fantasy drafts, where I see the tier breaks, my player targets, my avoids, and then pretty much how the first 3 rounds shape the rest of my drafts. And then also go through 3 individual mock drafts with different scoring settings and different league sizes to give you guys a feel for what this strategy looks like put into practice. So if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
VVS stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen.
Now, the reason for today's video is because I really wanted to tie together our hero RB, our zero RB, and our double hero RB draft strategy videos all into one, so you can kind of see how I use them in practice in terms of making an audible on the clock and trying to figure out, okay, we're going to actually use this draft strategy here in this draft. Because the biggest misconception I get is I'll post a draft strategy video and then I'll get a comment like this: hey Ron, I want to use a zero RB draft strategy, but I pick at the 11 spot. Is this strategy still going to work for me? And this is the biggest misconception. There is no draft strategy that works any better with any draft slot. There is no draft strategy that is better than the other. There's draft strategies that work in more leagues and more settings than others, but there's no, like, this strategy is the best, you got to go use it. It is, here are 3 different draft strategies so that you have the flexibility to take who you want in the early rounds, scoop the values up, and you can still make sure you're drafting a good and structurally sound team. And I think that this comment actually puts that extremely well. To be honest, I used this last year. He's talking about zero RB, but not by choice. All the running backs I wanted were taken, so I had to take wide receivers, and I won my league. And this is beautiful. The point of my strategy videos is not for you to watch the zero RB video and then go force it in your home league. It's to have something in your back pocket where if things go not to plan and you really want a running back early, but all the good ones are gone, and it sets you up in a way where you don't have to reach on a running back just to fill a need, but you can say, you know what, I've seen this video before on what to do when this happens, and you can pivot to a zero RB strategy and then win your league because of it. So you really want to take in what's happening in your league on your draft board, know the tendencies of your league mates, know the settings, and then from there, you can draft the best players up top and then filter that through one of these draft strategies. Because when we talk about these strategies, they're actually not all that dissimilar from each other. It's really just about these 3 core components of drafting. First, in blue, target running backs with league-winning upside in the first 3 rounds. Aim for 0 to 2 running backs through round 6. 3 running backs, I would say, is the max through 6 rounds. You can see hero RB, you're taking 1 running back early. Double hero, you're taking 2. Zero RB, you're taking none. Then you have the green. Avoid the running back dead zone in rounds 4 through 6. Now, of course, there's exceptions here, right? I like James Cook. I like Ken Walker. But there's also other profiles like your Zamir Whites of the world and Alvin Kamara's that I really would not like to draft here. And across the board, we're not really trying to focus on drafting running backs there. And instead, we're taking wide receivers. And instead, we're taking elite quarterbacks and or tight ends. Then the yellow highlight is winning the flex by drafting wide receivers through the flex, plus another 1 or 2 by round 10. And that sets you up to always have enough wide receivers to fill your flex. And I might say, Ron, why do I need enough wide receivers to fill the flex? Well, when we look at the Destination Devy wins above replacement tool, it spits out, based on your league settings, how many wide receivers should be in the flex across all of your leagues. And this is a 12-team, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, full PPR. That is 24 flex spots across your entire league. This says 18 of them should be wide receivers. So that's in a given week. You can start 2 wide receivers per team, that's 24. There's just more wide receivers that are startable and in your lineup in a given week, where at running back, you have 12 across the league and then 4 in flex spots. That's only 16 startable running backs. It's very hard to build your team to have an optimal running back in your flex. That would mean that you would need to have 3 top 16 running backs, 4 top 16 running backs to put running backs in there, and it's viable, but it's just not optimal. Now, you might say, well, Ron, this is 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, full PPR. What about half? And what about 1 flex? Well, when we go here, you can see on the bottom as well, still 9 of the 12 flex spots in this league should be wide receivers. Now, 2 plus 9 is 11, but that's just because they're rounding down. It could be like 2.33, 9.33, 0.33. But when we look at the optimal league-wide flex starters based on wins above replacement, which is just value over the replacement level player, even in a 1 flex half PPR, you still want to aim to have a wide receiver in the flex. And pretty much what this boils down to is every draft strategy we go through is pretty much figuring out how many running backs did you take early and how can we make sure we have enough wide receivers through the flex. So, you take no running backs in the first 3 rounds. Okay, this is going to be 0 RB. You fill the flex, you get elite quarterback and tight end, then you take your running backs later. Well, did you take 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds, right? Did value come to you? Did you take 2 running backs you really like? Well, from there, you can hold off on running back, hammer them later, and make sure you get wide receivers through the flex before then. Then take 1 running back, right? That's going to be a hero RB, 1 running back through the first 3 rounds, and you just keep things balanced from there on out. So it's really more of a give and take of how many of this position did you take early, then take the other late, right? If you took running backs early, you're going to take wide receivers late. If you took wide receivers early, you're going to take running backs late. And it's just kind of this push and pull of this balance because you can't have your cake and eat it too, because if you draft running backs early and late, you're taking on all this risk and you're also neglecting your flex with wide receiver spots, quarterbacks, tight ends, all of that. So it's just a matter of being able to draft through the first 3 rounds how you want to draft them, and then you can filter the rest of your draft around the decisions you made early on. So that brings us to how I view the early rounds, because it's easy to say, well, just take the best players through the first 3 rounds at, whoever you want them to be. Well, who are the best players? I'll be honest with you. Everyone probably views the first 3 rounds differently. I'm going to show you how I view them. Feel free to make your own rankings and just kind of make tiers, because I think the best thing you can do is to have tiers. So you go into the first 3 rounds and you say, okay, these are my tier 1 guys, my tier 2, my tier 3, and your goal should be to accumulate as many of the higher tier players as possible through 3 rounds and then build the rest of your draft around that. Now, the way that we're going to break this down is we're going to use the consensus draft rankings we made from the ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, Steals video, which is just pretty much the default rankings on each site. So not ADP. These are the rankings that everyone is drafting off of on ESPN, Sleeper, and Yahoo. So it's like the X rank on Yahoo. It's the default rankings on ESPN. And Sleeper, I think, is the same between ADP and consensus. And then we have the pick next to them. So what I then did is I took this and I inputted it into a Sleeper draft board. I did the first 4 rounds for you guys because not every draft's going to be the same. Some of these round 4 guys will go round 3. Some of the round 3 guys will go round 4. So now we get a rough overview of what we're going to be looking at in these drafts. So now we're going to go tier by tier and break down how I feel about the landscape in the first 4 rounds. Again, not everyone's going to feel this way, but I imagine some of you guys are going to be curious about how I feel. So we're going to start with the 101 candidates. This is the top 5. My favorite spot to pick from this year, anywhere in the top 5. I've gotten questions like this before, especially on streams, which, by the way, we stream every night. Make sure you check them out. But I'll get a question like this all the time, where it's like, Ron, I have the 101. I know everyone's taking McCaffrey, but what if I want to take Brees? And here's what I'll say. I have all these guys in the same tier, to be honest with you. You can take any of them first overall, and I wouldn't bat an eye. I'll be honest, if I'm doing 10 drafts and I get the 101, I'm taking McCaffrey first overall. But if you have like one home league with your buddies and that's all you play in terms of fantasy football, then you can take any of these top 5 guys, and I give you permission to do so. They all have cases to be 101, right? McCaffrey, first 24-plus point per game season last year since Alvin Kamara in 2020. CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 1, and he's still young and still attached to Dak. Tyreek was on pace for 2,000 receiving yards last year before getting hurt. Brees, top 6 running back last year off of an ACL, and now gets upgrades at quarterback, offensive line, and another year off the ACL tear. Then you have Bijan. He gets upgrades at offensive coordinator and quarterback and gets a year 2 bump. So they all have really, really good upside cases. It comes down to personal preference and then also thinking through, like also definitely think through in your head of, okay, if I take Tyreek, what does that look like in the second round? Do I like it better if I go, Tyreek? Tyreek's a bad example because I was going to use Achane, but do I like it better when I go CeeDee Lamb, Achane, or do I like it better when I go Brees Hall, Nico Collins? That's something you kind of have to go through in your head of these give and takes, because sometimes you're going to get to the second round and you're going to have players in the same tier. So it's definitely worth it to do some practice, which I will say, shout out to Underdog Fantasy. I think the best way to practice, it's not going to be exactly 1-to-1 of your home leagues, but you're going to see who the sharp players are taking early on. Make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. They'll match your first deposit up to $250 when you sign up there. I'll have a link in the description and the comment section down below. You can run drafts. It is the best way to practice because people actually have money on the line, and it's not just like, we're going to have mock drafts later in this video, and they're good, but they're not always super accurate. People don't have money on the line in these mock drafts. It's just kind of a CPU default rankings kind of thing. So it's a good way to get a feel and just kind of see what the market is doing, and you can kind of get into your home league drafts and really have a feel for where players should be going in an optimal market. Now, after that, we have the we have the mid first. So this is like if I'm picking between the 106 to 108. This is kind of how I view that section of the draft. And to me, of course, you have your 101 candidates in green. And I will say, we're going to have tier 1 in green, then yellow, then orange, then red. It's pretty much just like, I don't know if it's rainbow colors, but it's pretty much, yeah, I think that's rainbow colors, like reverse rainbow, but it's just pretty much how I view the tiers. And here in the mid first, I just have 2 tiers. I have those top 5, and then if the draft goes to plan and you're at the 106, 107, 108, I will say you should be jumping for joy if you can get one of the top 5. But if not, Chase, Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, still all really, really strong wide receivers. You get an elite wide receiver, and then you can take one of like Kyren Williams or Devon Achane in that next round and build a really solid, balanced team that way. Now, this is where things start to get tricky. All right, we're going to get to the late first, early second. So this is what I call the 1-2 turn, right? Late first, early second. So we showed the consensus 106 through 203. This is like about the area of players that you're looking at. Now, I know it's a lot to look at. Again, actually, let's keep this up here. We have tier 1 is green, tier 2 is yellow, tier 3 is orange, tier 4 is red. Now, green's not necessarily targets and red's not necessarily avoids. It's just how I view the breakdown of these players. And of course, if you're picking like the 109 to 112, any of Chase, Jefferson, Amon-Ra getting there is a gift, but it's also very unlikely. What's more likely is you can get one of A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, or Puka. To me, A.J. Brown is the highest floor in the first round. Puka is on like this Jefferson Chase year 2 trajectory. And then Garrett Wilson has all the talent in the world and now finally has a quarterback to go with it. You can take one of these wide receivers and you can come back around in the second round, in the early second, and you can take your favorite of these orange running backs, Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams. The reason that I don't have them in yellow is because, to be honest with you, the only running backs I see worthy of going in the first round are your Bijan, your Brees, and your McCaffrey. So I would just rather wait because I have Gibbs, Taylor, Kyren, Achane all in the same round. I know one of them will be in the second round. I don't know that about Puka, Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, because after they go, it's a huge tier break down to your Marvin Harrisons, Drake Londons, Nico Collins, who I even love, but definitely a tier break from your Puka and your Garrett Wilsons of the world. So that's why I would prioritize those wide receivers in the late first. Now, I do have Saquon in the red, right? He's the only guy in the red on this list. Me personally, I have him in a tier behind your Taylor, Gibbs, Kyren, and Achane because he hasn't shown efficiency in a while. He's an older running back. He's going to have his upside in receptions and touchdowns clipped by Jalen Hurts. So to me, I don't see him having that league-winning upside that we really want to prioritize in these early rounds. Now, you might say, well, Jonathan Taylor has the same concerns, but with Jonathan Taylor, he's only 25. He's in the prime of his career, and I'm just more confident in him being able to perform at a super efficient level and give you kind of what he did when he had 20-plus points per game in 2021, and he was just a monster on efficiency and touchdowns. I do believe that that is still in his range of outcomes as a player in his prime, which then takes us to the mid-second. Now, this is, again, if you're just coming back around with the Amon-Ra St. Brown pick or the Justin Jefferson pick, you're going to be picking right in that, like, 205 to 209 area, or no, like 207, 208-ish type of area. And, of course, it's not going to happen, but I do always want to outline these. Wilson, A.J. Brown, Puka. If they somehow slip to you at like the 204, you jump all over that. But the more realistic options are the running backs we're targeting here, which are Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane. I would love to start my draft with one of Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chase, and then you come back around and you get one of these running backs. But sometimes maybe you have a draft that has my rankings and those running backs are all gone, the green receivers are all gone, and now you're looking at the orange range, which to me, they're fine, right? This is where now if you want to take Saquon, you can. I'll have Marvin Harrison Jr. in there, who I think is fine as like a mid-second. Devontae Adams is fine as a mid-second. Olave, Drake London are fine as a mid-second. And then I'm apprehensive towards these guys as mid-seconds. Derrick Henry, I'll take in the early third. Same with Etienne and Pacheco. I just have them in a tier behind your Saquon, Kyren, JT, Gibbs, and Etienne. It's just personal preference. I don't know how any of those three hit the upside you need to take them in the second round. I would just rather at that point wait on them. Because if you're taking them in the second round, it's a tier break from the other running backs I like more. And a lot of the times if you're in position to take them, you probably already have like Brees or Bijan in the middle first. So it kind of comes down to who you took in the first round in terms of how you're going to view this mid-second round. But I wouldn't feel great taking an Etienne in the mid-second or Pacheco at like the 206. These are guys on Sleeper that are available in like the third round. Or Pacheco's available in the third round, Etienne is not. And then also Derrick Henry is pretty brutal. And then same with Mike Evans. Mike Evans isn't bad. I just don't see him as a clear tier above the wide receivers you're about to see in the early third. So now we're going to show the late second, early third here of just kind of like what you can see on the clock here. Now, of course, in the late second, if you can get a Marv to fall to you, a Devon Achane, you guys know I love Nico Collins as well, so I outlined him in green. Any of those three guys in the late second, I'm all over. And then late second is where I'm fine taking. Like now I have the yellow on Pacheco, ETN. You can do that for sure because you're going to come back around in the early third and you're going to have a pick at a pretty good wide receiver there. I even like Debo and Kupp. This is where it gets really wonky with consensus ADP. The 2-3 turn, I actually was tinkering my rankings this morning because the 2-3 turn is really difficult because consensus to me has it all wrong. Like I would have Kupp way up. I would have Debo way up. I would even have Malik Neighbors on this list, and he's not here. So it's kind of tough to wrestle with in terms of like playing game theory of getting the players you want to fall back to in the late fourth, but also not galaxy braining yourself, right? So I like Kupp, I like Debo, of course ETN, Pacheco, Olave, London, anywhere in the late second are all fine. And then we have our orange tier, which I still think are fine players. You can still find, but there's some potential for that Steelers trade. If you want to take one of the elite tight ends in Laporta, Kelsey, you can absolutely go ahead. If you want to take Allen, you can. Evans is fine as well once my yellows and greens are gone. Same with Derrick Henry, right? If you can take Derrick Henry, like the oranges I would say are more of like your early third targets, but I mean, Derrick Henry, honestly, on Sleeper, I want to say is like ranked 27, so he might be there in the early third if you're drafting on Sleeper. DJ Moore, Metcalf, Waddle are all good. The only reds I have in this area that I would not take at this 2-3 turn, right, late second, early third, would 100% be your Michael Pittman, who I've talked about before. I'm just not a big fan. He has the same career ADOT as like Jarvis Landry, and now you have a quarterback that pushes the ball downfield, and then also a coach that's going to want to run the ball in the red zone. So in the third round with Michael Pittman, when you can get T. Higgins in the fifth, Tank Dell in the fifth, Amari Cooper in the fifth, Devontae Smith in the fourth, Stephon Diggs in the fourth, Michael Pittman in the third, to me is absurd. And then Josh Jacobs in the third, I don't like that price either. I would just much rather in that next round that we'll talk about here in the third and fourth, you can get a Ken Walker, a James Cook, even Joe Mixon in that next round. So to me, like 306 feels really steep for Josh Jacobs, which then brings us to our final round here, which is going to be your round 3 and 4. Now, I will say, I hope that this is easy to follow. I know it's kind of a lot to look at, but I feel like I seconded it up okay. And I think that you can honestly even like take these tiers into your drafts with you and just kind of as like a, how does Ron see the board in my home league draft? Now from here, we're in the third and fourth round. So this is just like anywhere in the third round. This is kind of how I see things. Debo anywhere in the third is a smash. Nico as well. Cooper Kupp is a smash too. Those are my 3. Then we have like a really broad tier of yellows, to be honest with you, where any of the top 2 quarterbacks in Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen is good. Kelsey, Laporta are fine. I do like DJ Moore, Metcalf, Waddle anywhere in the third. Devontae Smith, Malik Neighbors, even though that they're priced in the fourth. And then after that, I would go to the running backs here, where now you can put Jacobs, Pittman, Cook, Mixon, Rashad White, Ken Walker. You can put Mahomes in there and Lamar. I would have Mahomes and Lamar as like a little baby tier break from Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts as guys that I'm still fine taking in the fourth round. And then after that, give me 2 reds here, which are going to be Alvin Kamara and Anthony Richardson. Kamara, we've talked about before. He is very much a stone cold dead zone running back on a bad offense. Efficiency dips every single year. He is simply a PPR play, which in the fourth round is a crazy bet to make to me when you have guys like, I don't know, I mean, later on, like I would rather take Najee Harris in the 6-7 turn, James Conner in that area as well. Like paying a fourth rounder for Kamara there is brutal. And then I actually like Anthony Richardson a lot, but it's crazy. These home league sites love Anthony Richardson. I don't know. It's not that I don't know why. I of course know why. Their projections are probably going crazy on his rushing upside, but if Lamar, Mahomes, and Hurts are fourth round picks, I would feel queasy about them taking Anthony Richardson in that same round. I would want a round or 2 discount from your Lamar, Mahomes, Hurts. If I'm going to take a quarterback in the fourth round, it's one of those 3. It's not Richardson. I'd rather draft Richardson in like the mid to late 5th. That's just how I view it. Now, moving on from that, let's get into the mock drafts for this video, which then brings us to our first mock draft here. Now, I will say, what we just did was a pretty decent look at how I view the first 3 to 4 rounds, but I will say, if you just want like the clear look at how I feel about the first, not just 4 rounds, but the top 200 picks in fantasy football, make sure you check out patreon.com/RonStewart. I have my top 200 rankings there. And then kind of like this video where we're looking at values by round, I have a target round based on the consensus rankings for each player. So based on your home league, where I'm targeting these players, I have my targets and avoids all highlighted, and I also have it all tiered. So you can kind of see within those first 3 rounds, okay, how does Ron have the tier breaks, and how can I pick the best players possible and then filter them down these draft strategies? They're also built in a way where it's pushing up those running backs early so that you can take your hero RB or double hero type of build, and it has the wide receivers pushed up in the dead zone with the quarterbacks and tight ends, and it just leads you down a road of filtering you through those draft strategies kind of naturally with my player takes as well. You can find that at patreon.com/RonStewart in the description or the comment section down below. Now, this mock draft is going to be 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, full PPR, a pretty standard version of how you're doing fantasy drafts. I will say these mocks are only 10 rounds as well because I really do want to focus on the early rounds. Now, again, anywhere in the top 5 is my favorite place to pick, and we picked from the 105 here, and we go Bijan Robinson. Again, any of those top 5 guys are amazing. Then we come back around in the second, and we take our highest ranked player, Devon Achane. Now, you, of course, you can take whoever you want. You could take whoever you like here, but to me, I have Achane higher than the rest, and that is now going to put us down a double hero RB draft strategy. So again, we didn't go into this draft saying, okay, we're going to do double hero. We went into this draft saying, okay, Bijan was the best player ranked, and then Achane was the best player ranked, and now the rest of this draft is going to be tailored to those decisions that we just made in those first 2 picks, which then brings us to the 3rd pick, which is Nico. Now, of course, you guys have seen me do a lot of these drafts. This is honestly kind of like our standard look after 3 rounds. We take Achane, we take Bijan, we take Nico Collins. Those are my guys. Now we can kind of just filter down the rest of this draft to 2 double hero RB. We take Metcalf in the 4th. That was a gift, but that's just kind of how these drafts go. Devontae Smith was also a good shout. He was still on the board as well. But we go Metcalf. We come back around, and I debated Dalton Kincaid very heavy, right, just to get an elite tight end. But I will say, on a lot of these mocks, I end up with an early tight end a lot. Like, I'll take McBride a lot. I'll take Kincaid a lot. So I wanted to give you a different look, and 5th round T. Higgins is an absolute steal. I keep moving him up the longer we have Jamar Chase held out of camp. Then we get the 6th round to come back to us, and we take another receiver. So because we went double hero up top, we decided to really make up ground at the position so that we're not falling behind at our flex spots or at our wide receiver spots in a full PPR, potentially start 4 wide receiver type of settings here. So now we're all good to go. I will say we could have maybe gone with a Dak or a Burrow, but in the 6th round, that's just too rich for me. Quarterbacks and tight ends really fly off the board on Sleeper. Then we come back around in the 7th round, and because we got sniped on quarterback, we could have gone Kyler, but I take a lot of Kyler in these, so I wanted to do something different. We take Godwin. So now we have wide receivers through the flex, +1 by round 10, and that gives us a lot of flexibility here to go away from receivers. So what we do is we take Ferguson. He's pretty much the last tight end that's like on the board that I would feel good about starting in week 1. And that's not bad. Like 8th round Jake Ferguson, if you're going to be in a setup that takes, Kyle Pitts, the pick after Kincaid, is actually pretty damn good value. Then we come around in these last 2 picks here, and we take Brian Thomas Jr., a nice upside pick, right? Especially when we're taking these wide receivers that don't have to go in our starting lineup right away. Taking these upside receivers is really nice. Now, Brian Thomas Jr., his stock is rising. He's like a 7th round pick in my rankings, but in these home league drafts, this is where a rookie like Brian Thomas Jr. might go, and he's a really good name to stash. And then we were weak at quarterback. We got a little bit of a gift in the 10th round, and we go Jaden Daniels. So I like Jaden Daniels. I will say, one of the worst things you can do in these drafts, right, is this team here. We took Ferguson. You don't need a backup tight end. We took Jaden Daniels. You do need a backup quarterback, right? If I take any quarterback that's past, like, for me, it goes Kyler, Burrow, Dak, Love, and then anybody I take after that, I want 2 decent quarterbacks. So after here, like the way the rest of this draft would go is I would secure a Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Herbert, all the way down to even if you want to just go high floor, like a Matthew Stafford or an Aaron Rodgers, one of those types. But just to have another option in case of Jaden Daniels starts slow as a rookie quarterback. I've been through this song and dance before with a guy like Trey Lance, and sometimes these guys come in even if they're scramblers and they don't produce right away. So just a little bit of insurance there. And then the rest of the draft would just be me throwing darts at upside receivers and just like handcuff bench running backs to churn through during the season. And this is what the team looks like when it's all said and done. And to me, this is really solid for this kind of league, right? Where we get Daniels is our only weak point, and he has a ton of upside. 2 stud running backs. We have Nico, Metcalf, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin. Wide receivers are weak point, but we have a stacked room. We kind of built it out of depth. And then Jake Ferguson's fine. And again, Jaden Daniels is serviceable. So this is a team that if this was a home league, I would be very much fine rolling with into this season. And this now brings us to our second mock draft. This is a half PPR, 12-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. So just 2 wide receivers and 1 flex means that we're not going to need to rely as much on our wide receiver value. So first up, we go McCaffrey out of the 101, especially in a league like this where it's just 1 flex, 2 wide receivers. I think he is the best possible guy you can go with. Of course, it's McCaffrey. But again, we do have that top 5, and you can take whoever you like there. Then after that, we come to this 2-3 turn, and we get a gift. We get Kyren Williams to fall back to us. And I will be honest, I did some maneuvering just to make this happen, like this scenario, because I do want to show you guys what happens. Like, again, only a Sith deals in absolutes. All right, we are aiming for 2 running backs through 6 rounds, but there is a scenario where I would take a 3rd running back, and it would be in this kind of setup where it's half PPR, 1 flex, and if I'm in a spot where I have my like 203 and my 204 fall back to me after taking McCaffrey, I have no problem going 3 straight running backs like this. The issue would be then going into the rest of your draft, drafting more and more running backs. This I can tell you straight up, these are going to be the only running backs we take through the first 10 rounds, and honestly, if I was doing a full mock draft, it would be the only running backs I take, period, because now we are behind, I guess the 8 ball you could call it. We are behind in general at other positions. We need to worry about quarterback now. We need to worry about tight end now. We need to worry about our wide receivers. We need to not be falling behind there. So we are all set at running back. We are drafting this team as if 2 out of the 3 running backs at worst are going to work out here. So then we come back around in the 4-5 turn, and we take T. Higgins and Trey McBride. Now that was, we could have taken another receiver, but in a 1 flex league, that puts even more of an emphasis on your quarterback and tight end, right? Because they take a higher percentage up of your lineups. Now we have our wide receiver 1 in T. Higgins. We have our tight end 1 in Trey McBride. And this doesn't even really have a label of a draft strategy. It would be like this is kind of like a modified double hero RB. Pretty much if I was to draft 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds, I would treat it like a double hero. But again, you're just not getting that 2nd or 3rd round pick for your running back. Then we come back around here at the 6-7 turn. And we take Rashee Rice, who's a gift in these home leagues. And then we get Joe Burrow stacked up to T. Higgins. You don't have to complete a stack, but I figured why not? Again, in just a 1 flex league, it does put a lot of emphasis on your quarterback. So now we have wide receivers to our wide receiver spot. We have HN in our flex, which isn't optimal, but again, it is viable, right? When we look at optimal wins above replacement by league, and we look at a 1 flex half PPR league, it's optimal for 9 of the 12 spots to be wide receivers, but it's also optimal for 2 of the 12 spots to be running backs. And we're betting here that the 3rd running back we take and the 3rd running back we put in our lineup is one of those 2 running back exceptions where he's so good that he deserves to be in your flex. That's what we're drafting like. Now, I think the big mistake would be drafting another running back. I think thinking that you could, at this point, if you draft another running back in this format, he's going to be sitting on your bench. So that's a huge no-no. If it was a 2 flex league, I would even be against it there because if you're taking that 4th running back, you're then betting that you have 4 running backs inside the top 15, which is tough. We know that they're fragile. We know that they bust, and you're going to be behind across the board. So 3 would really be my max through 6 rounds, but of course, there might be a value that presents itself, and you can stay flexible, but you're pushing it is really what I'm trying to say there. But after that, our next pick here that we take is going to be Brian Thomas Jr., JSN. So we get Brian Thomas Jr. as an upside wide receiver off the bench. You get JSN, who's like a fine wide receiver you can play in a given week. And then we take one more wide receiver, I believe, in Dontavion Wicks. Wicks isn't super pretty, but he's a fun upside wide receiver play. And now we have a team that, even though we took 3 wide receivers early, or 3 running backs early, it is built for success, and it's built correctly. And that's kind of the biggest takeaway here, is I wanted to show you what happens when things don't go according to plan, because that is what fantasy football is, right? It's staying flexible on the clock, letting things come to you, and you might have a draft here that doesn't really fit into our draft strategies, but you can still take, again, those core components, right, of avoiding the dead zone, filling your wide receiver and flex spots with wide receivers, making sure that you're drafting correctly. And I think that that's what we did here, even though it doesn't fit one of our definitions of drafting. And when we look at this team, I think it's pretty strong. Like, if this was a office home league of half PPR, 1 flex, 2 running backs, I think that it's absolutely viable, right? Burrow to T. Higgins, Rash Rice at the wide receiver 2 spot. You have JSN, Brian Thomas, and Dontavion Wicks kind of rotating in at the wide receiver 2 spot. You have Achane, you have Kyron, you have McCaffrey as your running backs, and then Trey McBride at tight end. This team only has a weakness at wide receiver, but we know in home leagues, wide receivers, you can get them so late and so much value that this team should be good to go. Now, let's move to our last mock draft. All right, so here is our last mock draft. We actually put a little bit of a twist here. We're going to do a 10-teamer. I've done so many of these videos, all 12 teamers. I put a poll out before I went live here, and about 40% of you guys, I know it was only 300 votes, but that's still a lot. Like, that's almost coming really close to 12 teamers. So if they're this popular, I'll throw you guys a bone. We'll do one 10-team mock draft here just to end kind of strategy season, I guess you could call it. And this is going to be a 10-teamer, full PPR, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and 1 flex spots. I have to assume that if you're playing in a 10-team league, you're going to at least have 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, or 3 wide receiver, 1 flex, so that there's at least some parity of like, okay, you need to have some depth because everyone's going to have a super team in this league. Now, from here, we pull the 110. So all of these mocks have been from different positions. We get the 110, which the last pick in a 12-teamer is brutal this year. The 112 is where things fall off, but the 110 and a 10-teamer, you still can get 2 of those high-end guys. Like when we look at from earlier, the late first, you can still get 2 of Garrett Wilson, Puka, and A.J. Brown. If you can set up your draft and you can start with 2 of those guys, that is absolutely massive. And that's what we do here. We take Garrett Wilson, and then we pair him with Puka Nacua. And to me, in a full PPR 3 wide receiver league, that is a really, really fun and good start. Now, we had a gift happen to us. I know I manipulated things in the last mock. This happened organically. We get Isaiah Pacheco, which in a 10-man league, that might be plausible, right? That's like pick 30. His rank on Sleeper is 28th. So that's like a 2-pick fall. He gets back to 310. And now what maybe we thought was a 0 RB build, we let the value come to us. We didn't stay stubborn and say, you know what? I wanted this to be a 0 RB. I'm going to take a tight end here instead. No, Pacheco came to us. We took the value. And now we're going to head down the path of a hero RB build. On the other side of this turn, we take Jalen Waddle. And now our wide receivers are stacked. We come back around in the 5th and we grab Devontae Smith. Now, through the flex spot, we have Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. That is a monster. Now, I will say, I debated very hard here taking Dalton Kincaid. I debated very hard taking T. Higgins, but we actually decided in a 10-team league where everyone's going to have a stacked roster, and also where tight ends and quarterbacks are going to be much easier to stream off of waivers, right? Because only 10 teams are going to be using them. You're going to have like the QB 11 and the QB 12 off of waivers. It's going to be pretty easy to stream quarterback and tight end. So we end up taking Kenneth Walker. So this actually kind of breaks the rules of double hero RB, or of hero RB, right? Where we take running back up top and then not another one until round 7 or later. But in a 10-team league like this, and the way the board was falling, you don't have to hammer a wide receiver here because in a 10-teamer, you're going to get the wide receiver value later on. So we can kind of break the rules of hero RB and make this almost like this is a mix between all of them. Like this is somewhere between double hero RB and 0 RB, where it's kind of like we didn't take a running back through the first 3 rounds, but we did. And we didn't go hero RB because we took the RB2 too early. But I think in a 10-team league, you can get away with this because the rest of this draft, we go Kyle Pitts and Anthony Richardson, right? Because only 10 teams, it means the onesies are going to fall. So we get Pitts late, we get Anthony Richardson late. And then we end our draft by getting Christian Watson and Keon Coleman as our plus 1 and 2 through the flex. So here's the final team, and I would feel really good about it, right? You have Richardson at quarterback, you have Kyle Pitts at tight end, your wide receivers are stacked with Wilson, Puka, Waddle, Devontae Smith, you have Pacheco, Kenneth Walker, you have Christian Watson, Keon Coleman. The rest of this draft, I would just spend pretty much hammering out RB2s and handcuffs and just taking swings on guys like, is Zach Moss out there? No, Zach Moss is not out there, but you can go with even like Chase Brown later on. You can go with Blake Corums. You could go with Tyler Algier, like Jalen Wright, any of those guys, and just really stack them up because you're just going to be churning through waivers in case something happens to Pacheco or Walker. But if not, this team is set up to absolutely dominate. So that is going to do it for us today. I appreciate everybody that came out here, watched all of our strategy videos this offseason. It's been a crazy offseason in terms of views, our streams, everything that you could possibly imagine. So this is pretty much it. I think we're going to have like one strategy video that's next week that's just like a very brief breakdown for the casuals that kind of come out in September. And then we'll do maybe like a draft strategy video centric towards like an ESPN or something, and then maybe we'll do Yahoo or Sleeper. I don't know yet. But in terms of like breaking down these macro strategies, this is it. So you take the strategy videos we've done, which I'll make sure to add this to a playlist, and you can sort of find on my channel a playlist of all of my strategy videos for 2024. In terms of practice, right? Watch my strategy videos, come out to the streams. We stream every single night from now through kickoff, either high stakes drafts that are a lot similar to your home leagues. We do underdog drafts, which are great practice for you guys as well. Again, promo code RON gets you a deposit match up to $250. You can practice on there as well. All of that should have you good to go for your draft. And all I ask for all of this info we've been doing this summer, if you enjoyed, if you learned something new, if you feel prepared for your fantasy draft, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, oh.